Hello and a very warm welcome to Breakfast News on Sabha TV. I'm Tina Jha. Let's begin with a look at the top stories first. Power supply restored to 60% of Kashmir Valley and almost 85% of Jammu. More armed police moved in to maintain law and order. As Jammu and Kashmir fights its worst ever disaster, the threat of an epidemic outbreak becomes real. Health Minister proposes floating clinics. President Pranab Mukherjee is in Vietnam on a 4-day visit. Key areas of oil exploration and connectivity on the agenda of his meeting starting today. More nations join the US-led alliance against the Islamic State in Iraq after a third beheading by the militant group in less than a month. An overloaded boat carrying African immigrants sinks off the coast of Libya. Most of the 250 people on board feared killed. The Jammu and Kashmir government claims power supply has been restored to 60% of the Kashmir Valley and 85% of Jammu. More than 2 lakh stranded people have been rescued now, even amid stone pelting by angry flood victims. More armed police have been flown into the valley to maintain law and order. Take a look at this full report.
Fresh rainfall in flood-ravaged Kashmir disrupted rescue operations on Sunday for a little while as hundreds of thousands of people were still marooned. Desperate for help after the horrific devastation caused by surging waters, the helplessness is apparent. The floods and landslides from days of heavy monsoon rains have left rescuers struggling to cope with the massive disaster.
आने वाले समय में हल्का-फुल्का बारिश होगा, उससे बहुत ज़्यादा फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, लेकिन रेस्क्यू कार्य जारी रहेगा क्योंकि मेन प्रायोरिटी ये है कि जो लोग अभी तक नहीं निकाले गए हैं उन लोगों को निकालने की कोशिश की जाएगी.
Jammu division, there is the chance for light to moderate rain till noon. After that, they may also subsidize, and thereafter only cloudy weather may occur. So, if we consider tomorrow weather, day after tomorrow, there will be chance a very light rain 1 or 2 places over whole Jammu Kashmir division.
The one positive that emerged on Sunday is that flood waters started receding in some affected areas, but not enough to pacify victims angry at the apathy of the state government.
सारा लोकल जो है उन्होंने किया था, जो भी एयर फोर्स था या जो आर्मी थी, वो जो रेस्क्यू हुआ था वो वीआईपी टूरिस्ट के लिए था.
नाराजगी है, इससे कोई इनकार नहीं कर सकता. रिलीफ हर जगह अगर हम ना भी पहुंचा सकें, लेकिन बहुत से एरियाज आज कवर हुए हैं. 50 से ज़्यादा ट्रकें राशन भर के शहर के मुख्तलिफ इलाकों तक पहुंचाए गए हैं.
Chief Minister Omar Abdullah has now directed concerned departments to redouble the ration supply to the valley. Abdullah has directed the Consumer Affairs and Public Distribution Department to double the ration supply by roping in vehicles from SRTC. The CAPD has distributed 50 trucks of ration in Srinagar till now.
ट्रकों की कमी है. जहां मेरे पास ट्रक है वहां मेरे पास डीजल नहीं है. अब डीजल की गाड़ियां जो है जम्मू से सिंथन पास करके ये ट्रकें भेजी जा रही हैं. ये डीजल मेरे पास अवेलेबल हो तो ये सामान जो है हम लोगों तक पहुंचाएं. आज मुख्तलिफ किस्म के चैलेंजेस हैं. गाड़ियों की कमी, डीजल की कमी, राशन की कमी, इन सब चीज़ों को आहिस्ता आहिस्ता एड्रेस किया जा रहा है.
The closure of the 300-kilometer-long Jammu-Srinagar highway has made the task of the personnel that much more difficult. An alternate route is now being used to get essential supplies to the valley.
नेशनल हाईवे का बुरा हाल है. बुरा हाल इस लिहाज से कि रामबन और रामसू के दरमियान एक ऐसा एरिया है जहां रास्ता पूरी तरह से बह गया है. बॉर्डर रोड्स वाले बहुत मेहनत कर रहे हैं इस रास्ते को नए सिरे से जो है खोलने की, लेकिन वहां पे स्लाइड्स का खतरा रहता है. फ़िलहाल बॉर्डर रोड्स वालों ने फिर एक बहुत मेहनत करके किश्तवाड़ से रास्ता खुला है.
The natural disaster has caused an initial estimated loss of over 5,000 crore rupees to the state's economy, with the worst hit sector being tourism. With Kriti Mishra, Ravindra Sharan and Pranav Goswami in Srinagar, Bureau Inputs for Rajya Sabha TV.
A huge task now is moving the people evacuated from flood-hit areas to their homes. Our correspondent Kriti Mishra spoke to some of them at the Srinagar airport, people eager to just get out. Let's listen.
After the massive rescue operation, relief work has become the cynosure of all agencies in Jammu and Kashmir. We are at the Srinagar airport where a number of people have been stranded since long. Let's try and speak to some of them. भैया क्या हुआ था, कहाँ फंसे हुए थे आप लोग?
हम लोग राजबाग में फंसे थे, वहाँ पर राजभवन, वहाँ पर 6-7 दिन से हम लोग फंसे थे। वहाँ पर कोई व्यवस्था नहीं था, लेकिन यहाँ हम लोग जब अपने किराया भाड़ा से आए हैं तो यहाँ के अफसर लोग जो बोले हैं कि तुम लोगों को अपना सुरक्षित ढंग से बिहार पहुँचाया जाएगा।
यहाँ जब आप रिलीफ कैंप में आए तो आपको खाने पीने की सुविधा थी?
जी, खाने पीने की कोई दिक्कत नहीं है हमें जब से हम आए, मगर हमें बस फुर्सत से घर पहुँचा दे और कोई नहीं चाहता।
The devastating flood has instilled fear psychosis in people. All that they want now is to reach back their homes safely. Reporting from Srinagar, Kriti Mishra for Rajya Sabha Television.
And our correspondent Ravindra Shoran joins us on the phone line from Srinagar. Ravindra, amid the Herculean efforts by the army and the other rescue forces, the rescue efforts are continuing. What are the steps being taken to tackle the epidemic threat that is now looming large in the state? All right, we seem to have lost the phone line with Ravindra. In the meanwhile, we connect to another correspondent, Pranav Goswami, who's just returned from Srinagar after spending a week there. Pranav, you've tracked the developments there in Kashmir very closely. You've watched the rescue efforts very, very carefully. Tell us about the progress in the rescue efforts there in Srinagar. All right, due to some problem, we've been unable to connect to Pranav as well. Moving on in the bulletin now. Adding to the misery of people stranded in Jammu and Kashmir due to the floods, the threat of an epidemic outbreak looms large. The health department is making arrangements for the impending threat on war footing, issuing advisories and deploying doctors and paramedics across the valley. Health Minister Harshvardhan visited the state on Sunday to review the situation.
As flood waters begin to recede in some parts of Jammu and Kashmir, the state is looking at another worrisome challenge, the threat of an epidemic outbreak. With the water ebbing away, streets are seen filled with carcasses of hundreds of stray animals and tons of garbage. The stagnant water in many areas has become the breeding ground for mosquitoes, which could give rise to many waterborne diseases. There is an urgent need to take steps to check the spread of an epidemic to avert a bigger disaster.
गवर्नमेंट को, पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज़ को डाउन बिलो जो हमारी जो मोहल्ला कमेटीज़ हैं, मस्जिद कमेटीज़ हैं, उनके साथ कोऑर्डिनेट करके उससे लोगों तक जो है इसको राशन पहुंचाया जा सकता है। क्लोरीन टैबलेट्स जहां आ चुकी हैं, कुछ और चाहिए, जैसे जो आपका होता है ब्लीचिंग पाउडर, घरों को साफ करने के लिए गर्म कंबल चाहिए, हमें गर्म कपड़े चाहिए, ये हमें अभी इमीडिएट रिलीफ चाहिए। इस वक्त
काम करना ज़रूरी है, री-एस्टेब्लिशमेंट ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट मशीनरी एंड स्टार्टिंग द रिलीफ ऑपरेशंस इन ए बिग वे। मेडिकल सप्लाईज की तरफ, फूड एंड सप्लाईज की तरफ, कपड़े लोगों को देना, जहाँ पे ये ट्रेजेडीज हो गई हैं, लोग मर गए हैं, उनकी सहायता, उनका डिस्पोजल, डेड बॉडीज पड़ी हुई हैं, तो उनके रहते हुए आदमी का होश हवास ठीक नहीं रहेगा।
Health Minister Harshvardhan on Sunday pledged additional consignments of medicines and other essentials for the state. The minister said the government is prepared to boost supplies to deal with the post-flood situation. He said various kinds of antibiotics and other essential medicines will be sent to the affected areas in the next few days. A team of doctors from central government hospitals will also be sent soon, and the Indian Medical Association and Delhi Medical Association are also on standby to provide assistance.
जो यहाँ पर जिस तरह की सहायता की आवश्यकता है, उसकी सारी जानकारी हम जाकर प्रधानमंत्री जी को देंगे। प्रधानमंत्री जी सुबह शाम इसकी व्यक्तिगत तौर पर मॉनिटरिंग कर रहे हैं, इसके लिए चिंतित हैं, और मैं यहाँ के लोगों को ये विश्वास दिलाना चाहता हूँ कि सारा देश उनके साथ है, सारी सरकार उनके साथ है।
with very limited or no access to clean drinking water. 13 tons of water purifying tablets and 6 water filtration plants have already reached Srinagar. Sewage pumps and other engineering equipment have also been sent. Bureau Report, Sabha TV.
Meanwhile, let's go across to our correspondent Ravindra Sharan in Srinagar. Ravindra, amid the rescue efforts, the epidemic threat looms large in Srinagar. What are the steps being taken to prevent or tackle the epidemic from spreading?
Yeah, Tina, the government is trying to, over 13,000 people has been rescued so far, but the government is now concerning how to tackle the risk of the epidemic, which is feared. The central government has sent more than 28 tons of medicine to the people who are still stuck and who has been rescued and taken to some safe places. Also, 80 lakhs of chlorine tablets has also been sent to them. I must tell you one thing, that yesterday there was some rains which stopped the rescue operations, but now after the weather is clear, the rescue operations are still going on. Armed forces and National Disaster Relief Forces have rescued over 2 lakh trapped people as the operations enter today in the 14th day. Over 1 lakh people are still marooned under the worst floods in the state in a century.
Ravindra, what about the power situation? Over 60% of the power in Srinagar has been restored. Does it bring any relief to the residents there?
This is a big reprieve for the people who has been stuck here in the darkness for the last 14 days. Yesterday we spoke to the Power Minister of Jammu and Kashmir State. He has confirmed this report that more than 60% of the area is now illuminated. The power supply has been restored in those areas. And now also the major concern for the Jammu Kashmir and the central government is that the BRO, the Border Road Organization, is now focusing how to open the main corridor, that is the Jammu and Srinagar highway, so that maximum help can be provided to the people who could not be reached by any efforts. By even the boats can't reach there, they can't be airlifted, and relief material also has not been reached. Through the roads, if the BRO will be able, the Chief Minister also assured us that within the next 48 hours, Jammu and Srinagar highway can also be opened.
Ravindra, what are the steps being taken by the state government? Apart from the army, how has the state government pitched in to pull out, evacuate people, provide them with the relief material?
The state government, let me tell you one thing, Tina, the people in Srinagar are not very happy with the state government's efforts. Yesterday we spoke to the Chief Minister and a couple of more ministers. The Chief Minister also sent a delegation to meet the Prime Minister of India, and the Chief Minister said that we could not help the people during the initial days. The reason being that the whole government was also flooded. Reason being that the Secretariat, all the houses of the ministers, they were also under the 30 to 20 feet water. This is the main reason, and that is the reason that people are in distress. The civil government was a failure, but after the water receded, the chief minister could contact all his ministers. The rescue operations by the state government also started. Now with the coordination of state government and central government, with the team of NDRF and the army, the joint operations is going on, and people of Kashmir are now, all the ministries and the...
All right, Ravindra, thank you so much. We'll come back to you and get more developments as and when news comes in from Srinagar. Meanwhile, our correspondent Ravindra also spoke to Congress leader Ambika Soni on the situation there. Let's take a listen.
We have now been joined by the senior Congress leader Ambika Soni ji. She is here to oversee the relief camps which has been organized by the Congress party. Ma'am, you saw some incident happened yesterday with the volunteers of the Youth Congress.
Well, yes, that's true. Our Youth Congress, local Youth Congress office bearers were on their daily visit to far-flung areas which have been badly affected, and nobody has gone there. So they were taking relief measures like cooked food and blankets, etc., and distributing. And then they have got a cell phone recording of what happened, and they were just telling me that Mr. Yasin Malik came and physically overpowered all of them with his group of people and took away their boat, threw their belongings, the relief material all over into the water maybe. and put some things of his own in the boat and took it away. And a little while further, they left the boat for whatever it was, and he went to talk to media people. That means, what did he do? I feel that relief, whoever does today, should do it without any political interest.
And for those looking for more information on the flood situation in Jammu and Kashmir, the centre has come out with helpline numbers. Here are the flood control room numbers set up by the government being displayed on your TV screens. Meanwhile, in neighbouring Pakistan, the death toll from floods has gone up to 274. Reports from Pakistan say as many as 2.3 million people have been affected. On Sunday, rescue operations were concentrated around the central city of Multan, which is said to be among the worst hit. Authorities blew up 2 dikes to try to stop the water inundating the city. Multan is said to be practically cut off from the surrounding districts. Roads and railway track remain submerged. In addition, 300 villages around Muzaffargarh have been inundated. Floods have also devastated thousands of acres of the cotton crop. And we'll step into a short break here. On the other side, high alert sounded in Mexico as powerful hurricane Odile is set to move inland. Thousands evacuated. That and much more on the other side. Do stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching The Breakfast News. Now, President Pranab Mukherjee reached Vietnam capital Hanoi yesterday on a 4-day visit. Several important agreements on oil exploration and improved connectivity are on the cards between the two countries. Here's a report.
President Pranab Mukherjee is in the strategically important Vietnam for 4-day state visit. The president is accompanied by Petroleum and Natural Gas Minister Dharmendra Pradhan and 6 other MPs. During his visit, President Mukherjee will meet his Vietnamese counterpart Trong Tang Sang and also the General Secretary of the Vietnamese Communist Party, the Prime Minister and the Chairman of the National Assembly.
Vietnam is a key partner in our enhanced Look East policy. Our priorities in bilateral relations include expanding our trade and investment engagement, securing our energy resources, integrating with ASEAN, and also leveraging interactions in regional and international fora.
A number of key agreements are expected to be inked during this visit. These include agreements concerning oil and gas exploration and direct air services between the two nations. ONGC Videsh Limited and Petro Vietnam are likely to sign an agreement regarding exploration in the South China Sea.
The number of projects that have started and the 26 sectoral dialogues with ASEAN are itself a proof that almost every important ministry in India is engaged in talking to their counterparts in the ASEAN countries.
The president's visit to Vietnam comes at a time when Chinese President Xi Jinping is scheduled to visit India on 16th of September. This might be seen as a carefully orchestrated diplomatic maneuver by India, as the country's growing engagement with Vietnam is a sign of deepening relations between them. The visit is also a signal that India is keen to engage more deeply with ASEAN nations.
The signal is very clear that India wants to step up its engagement with ASEAN-related countries, not only at a community level, but also separately and one-to-one. It may create an atmosphere of balance of power and lasting peace in the whole region and a culture of non-encroachment. Akhilesh Suman for Rajya Sabha Television.
And ahead of Chinese President Xi Jinping's visit this week, China has welcomed India's efforts to push reforms to spur economic growth. China has said that it was ready to meet India halfway in its quest for development and prosperity. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi said China is all set to sign pacts providing for major investment in infrastructure projects in India, including industrial parks and railways networks during Xi's visit. China has indicated that it will invest $100 billion in India over the next 5 years. China is also considering investing billions of dollars in India's rail network. It has already asked India to hand over certain railway corridors for it to build, develop and maintain high-speed railway lines. India has also invited China to modernize railway stations. Moving on, Britain says it will support US military action in Iraq, terming the beheading of a British national by Islamic State militants there an act of pure evil. Several Middle Eastern countries and Australia have also agreed to come on board. Here's a report.
I would like to declare that I hold you, David Cameron, entirely responsible for my execution.
After James Foley and Stephen Sotloff, now David Haines, the British man who appeared as a hostage in Stephen Sotloff's beheading video has become the Islamic State's latest victim. This comes hardly a week after IS militants released the beheading video of US journalist Stephen Sotloff.
Just as your predecessor, Tony Blair, did, following a trend amongst our British Prime Ministers who can't find the courage to say no to the Americans.
David Haines, a 44-year-old aid worker, was seized in Syria in 2013. The video of his killing also includes a threat to kill a second British hostage, Alan Henning. British Prime Minister David Cameron confirmed Haines' death, calling it as an act of pure evil. He also called a crisis meeting of top military and political officials soon after the video was released online.
The United States is taking direct military action. We support that. British Tornadoes and surveillance aircraft have been helping with intelligence gathering and logistics. This is not about British combat troops on the ground. It is about working with others to extinguish this terrorist threat.
This particular terrorist group does not just do evil, but exults in doing evil. We also know that this is a terrorist group which is reaching out to Australia because there are at least 60 Australians that we know of that are working with terrorist groups in the Middle East.
The international community also lashed out at the IS over the incident. President Barack Obama in a statement said that the US will work with UK and a broad coalition of nations to wipe out Islamic militants. Ahead of an international conference on battling the Islamic State militants, US Secretary of State John Kerry has arrived in Paris en route, Egypt. France is scheduled to host the conference today.
As an intellectual and cultural capital of the Muslim world, Egypt has a critical role to play in publicly renouncing the ideology that ISIL disseminate.
Australia is preparing to make a contribution which is prudent and proportionate as part of a coalition of nations that will be led by the United States, but which will be supporting the legitimate government of Iraq.
Even as the international community rallies against the IS, Iraqi army and Shiite militia said that they were close to pushing back militants from a village in north of Amerli region. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And to discuss more on the increasing menace of the IS group, we are joined this morning by Mr. Yogendrakumar, former ambassador. A very warm welcome to Rajya Sabha TV, sir. The third Western captive beheaded by the Islamic State group. Do you see it as a response to Obama's strategy to fight the Islamic State militants?
Well, I think it is part of their psychological and propaganda war. And this is in a way, they are basically to create a psychological effect on the population that they control. Because by creating this kind of a terror, it's easier for them to bring into submission the population which are either under their control or the population which they are targeting. Yeah. That is one aspect. The other aspect, of course, is that there is clearly anger amongst the countries and the governments, whose victims, whose hostages actually have been executed like this, and some are already being lined up. But it also aims, this particular strategy that the ISIL is following, is to create animosity or animus amongst the communities living in these countries. Right. You know, that sort of a situation. And there's a huge symbolism in this. And the symbolism really is that the hostages are dressed in the orange suit, which the Guantanamo prisoners were wearing. And here it is seen to be taking a revenge for what they consider are the atrocities committed by the Western countries against, let us say, the Muslim population. So that's basically what it amounts to. But certainly it is actually in terms of its capacities, in terms of its financial resources, they're actually quite well endowed. In fact, the different figures being given, one figure is that they're earning about $3 million a day. The other figure given is that they're earning $8 million a month. So the figures vary. But the fact of the matter is that they have resources and they have sophisticated military hardware and the capacity to use it. The other aspect of this is that while Al-Qaeda was more of an Arab kind of, Arab elements who actually constitute Al-Qaeda, but this time you have a huge international link to this particular terrorist group.
So after this incident, do we see Britain formally joining the United States in carrying out airstrikes in Iraq and Syria?
As you just played the clip of Prime Minister Cameron, certainly they are providing the assistance in terms of intelligence gathering and so on and so forth. But as to whether they'll actually start joining the Americans in terms of bombing operations, that I think is a little unsure about that, in the sense that they've also announced after the execution of David Haines that they have another British hostage with them. So obviously it creates for a government a very difficult dilemma as to what kind of decision they can take.
Even though David Cameron is refraining from doing that, there's pressure back home that he's facing.
Exactly. So it's a dilemma on both sides. I mean, the hostage family side, and also from the fact, from the side of, let us say, the wider British society, that one of their citizens actually has been so brutally executed. So that is the other thing. As I said, in terms of this particular issue was discussed at the NATO summit earlier, and where all the NATO members, they talked about the fear or what they call the returning foreign jihadis. But actually they are not really foreign jihadis. They are people from their own sort of country which had gone there, and the apprehension that when they go back in their respective countries, they may cause a lot of, let us say, this kind of terrorist activity.
There are analysts who have also raised questions on, not sending ground troops. So the relevance of the success of this coalition and the fight against Islamic State without actually sending ground forces, till how long can you depend only on airstrikes?
I think that's a very good question, because in one way they are trying to replicate the example that they have in Afghanistan, where they had the Northern Alliance troops and they got the cover of precision bombing of the Taliban gun positions, because of which they were able to actually rid Afghanistan of the Taliban. The problem actually here is twofold. One is that in Iraq itself, the army actually has become more like a Shia militia. And they're actually, so there they are actually getting into the Shia-Sunni kind of, animosity which developed. That's one aspect. Then you have also the Peshmergas, who are in a way not quite within the control of the Iraqi army structure. So what you have is that it's not really a regular army that Iraq can actually say it commands to fight against the ISIL. The second issue also is that Syria, which is also a major base for these elements, there the Americans are at the horns of dilemma, because they are also, the President Obama's policy actually is that they are also aiding what they consider to be the moderate rebel groups against the president of Syria. And the Syrian president has already declared opposition to any American airstrikes.
And so I'm afraid I'll have to stop you at that. We are really running short on time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, a powerful hurricane, Odile, bore down on a resort area in Mexico on Sunday, prompting Mexican authorities to evacuate vulnerable coastal areas and prepare shelters for up to 30,000 people. Odile, which rapidly became a Category 4 hurricane overnight, was 300 kilometers off the southern tip of Baja by Sunday evening, moving northwest rapidly. Mexican authorities have warned people to stay off the beach, remain indoors. Government officials have also said electricity would be shut off in the area as the storm hit to avoid damages from downed power lines. With that, we end our edition of Breakfast News. Thanks for watching and have a great day.